One cannot deny the overwhelming impact that little Walter had on the music industry, but behind the scenes, Walter's life was tormented by sad circumstances. What were the reasons for the eerie occurrences that occurred for this pioneer in the blues music scene? Let's find the heartbreaking and riveting story of little Walter's life and the tragic chain of circumstances that led to his premature birth and death. Early life and musical beginnings. To have a complete comprehension of little Walter, it is necessary to turn our attention to the beginning, to his younger years and the beginnings of his musical career. First, let's learn about childhood and musical beginnings. Walter's youth was distinguished by rural poverty, and he spent his boyhood on a farm in Alexandria. However, it was when he was only 8 years old that his life took a significant turn for the better. Eventually, he was able to get his very first harmonica, a straightforward instrument that would turn out to be his gateway to a whole new universe. Even though he had no formal instruction, Walter relied on his inherent musical skill and his acute ear. Through numerous hours of listening to recordings of John Lee's Sonny Boy, Williamson painstakingly imitated the sounds and methods of this pioneer in the blues harmonica genre. The restless energy that Walter had, along with his passion for music, drove him to make a courageous choice when he was only 12 years old. He embarked on his journey into the world, taking nothing with him but his harmonica and an idea about what he wanted to do. He began practicing his abilities in the city's lively bar scene in New Orleans, which was his first destination after arriving in the United States. This was the first time that Walter had the opportunity to play in front of an audience, and he learned how to capture listeners with his distinctive voice. While Walter was making his way north towards Chicago, his path was similar to that of many black people from the South who were migrating during the Great Migration. This trip, on the other hand, was not at all straightforward. Throughout his career, Walter made long pauses in several places, each of which contributed to his musical development and helped shape his sound. During his time in Helena, Arkansas, Walter immersed himself in the local blues scene, where he was able to learn new influences and improve his technique. During his stay in Memphis, he was exposed to the city's extensive musical history, which allowed him to further broaden his repertoire of musical styles. Walter was able to meet and learn from well-known artists during his time in St. Louis, which would prove to be another significant stop on his journey. He had a chance encounter with his hero, Sonny Boy Williamson, which was probably the most important of these experiences. During this meeting, as well as via his contacts with other blues stalwarts like Honey Boy Edwards, Walter gained crucial insights and inspiration. He absorbed their expertise and incorporated aspects of their approaches into his own emerging sound with the help of their influences. In 1947, when Walter was just 17 years old, he landed in Chicago for the first time. During his climb to popularity, the city, with its booming blues culture, would serve as the background for his career growth. But Walter's talents on the harmonica were not the only thing he brought to Chicago. He traveled across the South, bringing with him a multitude of experiences and musical influences that he had accumulated along the way. Throughout the early years of Walter's life, his age was frequently a source of uncertainty. This is something that should be noted. Documents from a variety of sources, including his declarations, occasionally stated alternative birth years. This mismatch was most likely caused by Walter's desire to give the impression that he was older to gain recording contracts and performances. On the other hand, 1930 finally became the year of his birth that was most frequently mentioned. Get to the top of the list. Once Walter arrived in Chicago, he was not slow to start making a name for himself. He threw himself into performing on the bustling streets, especially at the Maxwell Street Jewish Market, which was famous for its rhythmic and crowded atmosphere. Here, he played music for tips and support from passers-by. Not only was he a talented musician, Walter was also able to realize a variety of different musical genres, from romantic waltzes and cheerful polkas to blues, which could be linked to his roots and passions. This diversity gradually helped Walter attract more and more attention from the audience. However, he did not feel satisfied with just playing the harmonica, although it was one of his strengths. Eager to expand and explore other aspects of music, Walter decided to turn his attention to the guitar, believing that it would be the main instrument for him to continue developing his musical career. Moody Jones, a guitarist who was born in Arkansas, recalls Walter's ambition to become more proficient with this new instrument. Walter was anxious to learn and imitate what Jones was doing, so he would go about following Jones around. In the course of his career, Walter's commitment to his profession would become a defining characteristic. During this period, Walter recorded his debut recording, which was a demo that was never published and included him playing guitar in support of Jones. Even though this album was never released to the public, it was the beginning of Walter's career as a recording artist and provided a glimpse into the musical flexibility that would later distinguish him from other artists. Despite this, it was Walter's creative approach to the harmonica that would ultimately bring about a revolution in the blues field. After becoming dissatisfied with the fact that his harp was being overpowered by electric guitars, Walter devised a solution that was both straightforward and revolutionary. In addition to playing his harmonica, he started holding a tiny microphone in his hands and plugged it into a public address system or a guitar amplifier. He was able to compete with the loudness of any guitarist thanks to this approach, but Walter did not stop there despite his success. When compared to his contemporaries, who were utilizing amplification merely for the sake of increasing volume, Walter pushed his amplifiers beyond the technological boundaries that were intended for them. This amplification allowed him to experiment with and generate radical new timbres and audio effects that had never been heard before from a harmonica or any other instrument. He did this by using the amplification. This forward-thinking approach would eventually become Walter's hallmark sound and lead to a significant shift in the landscape of blues music. It wasn't long before others began to recognize Walter's skill. During the year 1947, he made his first formal recording appearance for Aura Nell, a modest record label that was housed in the Maxwell Street record shop owned by Bernard and Red Abrams. Walter recorded a blues boogie called I Just Keep Loving Her, which displayed his rising abilities. Autumn Brown played the guitar and provided backing for the recording. Aura Nell Blues was included on the reverse side of the record, and it had Walter performing behind Brown. This gave listeners a glimpse of the variety that Walter possesses. At the same time as Walter's concerts on Maxwell Street continued to garner attention, he started to socialize with blues musicians from the surrounding area. It wasn't long before he became acquainted with notable figures such as Tampa Red and Big Bill Bruns, but it was his relationship with guitarist Jimmy Rogers that would prove to be a pivotal moment in his professional life. The introduction of Walter to Muddy Waters, which was a move that would change the direction of blues history, was made by Rogers, who was struck by Walter's exceptional skill. Walter joined Waters' road band in 1948, which already had Rogers on guitar, Big Crawford on bass, and Babyface Leroy on drums. Waters' road band also featured Big Crawford on bass. This collaboration marked the beginning of a musical relationship that would go on to produce some of the most important blues records in the history of the genre. Being a member of Waters' band, Walter brought about a significant change. The blues combo was transformed from a rural string band into what has been characterized as a wind and string orchestra as a result of his contribution, which brought about a new dimension to the formation. It was Walter's amplified harmonica that was responsible for producing eerie tones and lengthy, drawn-out bends that resembled horns. He eventually became the principal soloist in the band. The new sound had an immediate and far-reaching influence on the surrounding environment. Louisiana blues was a smash throughout the country, and it was recorded by Waters and Walter in 1951 as part of a trio that created the song. This achievement was only the beginning of things. In addition, Walter participated alongside Waters on the recordings of the Little Walter Trio and the Babyface Trio that were made at Parkway Studio. Babyface Leroy's version of Rolling and Tumbling, which included Walter's harmonica and Waters' slide guitar, was one of the most notable tunes that emerged during this period. This song has been acclaimed as one of the most powerful Chicago blues tunes that has ever been recorded by several various reviewers and historians. Within a short period, the trio of Waters, Rogers, and Walter established themselves as a powerful force in the Chicago blues atmosphere. They even got themselves the term headhunters, which reflected their self-assurance and their desire to compete with the ones around them. Later on, Waters said that they would search for other bands that were performing and would be prepared to destroy them if they were given the opportunity. We are leaving the group. In the year 1952, Walter had recently achieved success with the stage theme song that the Waters Band had performed for Chess Records to promote their album. At first, the tune was published under the moniker Juke. However, it was an unnamed boogie instrumental to begin with. An original work called Crazy About You Baby was featured on the B-side of the record. This composition was inspired by Sonny Boy Williamson's song Crazy About You Gal. Walter was completely unaware of the fact that this record would alter the trajectory of his professional life. While Walter was on tour in Louisiana with Waters' band, he learned information that would forever change the course of his life trajectory. Juke had risen to the top of the charts. As a result of this achievement, Walter was overcome with a sense of joy. When he was feeling very enthusiastic, he made the courageous choice to leave the band and head back to Chicago as soon as possible. The unexpected departure of Walter was a demonstration of his aspirations and his confidence in his ability to succeed on his own. After arriving back in Chicago, Walter was surprised to find out about an intriguing turn of events. Following Walter's departure from the Four Aces, Junior Wells, who played the harmonica for the band, joined Muddy Waters' band to fill the void left by Walter. Due to this unanticipated change of events, Walter was presented with an opportunity that was ideal for him. Without skipping a beat, he jumped at the opportunity to become a member of the Aces, a band that featured Dave Myers and Lewis on guitars, as well as Freddie Below on drums. Walter's abilities were able to be completely expressed thanks to the Aces, who provided him with the right musical framework. After some time had passed, Dave Myers would say that their quick and adaptable style of playing was the ideal complement to Walter's degree of musicianship. The members of the band were all in the process of broadening their musical expressions and exploring other forms of music, which had the effect of establishing an atmosphere that was conducive to continuous development and innovation. Within a short period, Walter was able to achieve a leadership position within the Aces, bringing with him a lively energy and an insatiable thirst for experimental musical ideas. Drummer Freddie Below, who was a member of the band, compared Walter's attitude to that of a school administrator. The continuous calls for rehearsals that Walter made were to refine existing songs and experiment with new ones. During every session, his unwavering commitment to enhancing their sound and expanding the bounds of their music was readily apparent. The recording process for this new lineup, which is now being labeled as Little Walter and His Jukes or Little Walter and His Nightcats, started at Chess Studios. The succession of singles that followed was nothing short of astounding, and they frequently outsold those that Muddy Waters' band had released after them. Throughout his career, Walter had successfully made the shift from being a supporting player to commanding his performing group. When it came to the rhythm and blues charts, Walter remained a formidable presence throughout the whole year of 1954. It wasn't until 1955, however, that he would achieve his greatest success to that point in his career. My Babe was the name of the song, which was composed by Willie Dixon and was adapted from the gospel song This Train. It's interesting to note that Walter first had a negative reaction to the song, but Dixon was eventually convinced that Walter would be the ideal musician to record it. Dixon's dogged determination was rewarded. After 2 years, Walter finally gave in and consented to record My Babe, despite his initial hesitation to agree to do so. The end conclusion was a thrilling one. As soon as the album was made available to the public, It soared to the top of the charts, becoming Walter's greatest successful single and establishing him as a blues celebrity. During this period, Walter's music may be described as groundbreaking. The Chicago blues historian Mike Rowe made the observation that Walter gave birth to a distinct style of blues. The sound of his amplified harmonica was so large and his phrasing was so original that it frequently appeared as if he was playing a saxophone rather than a harmonica. His approach was more jazz-based, and his phrasing was so innovative. With his one-of-a-kind approach to the blues, Walter distinguished himself from his contemporaries and contributed to the establishment of a new era in the genre. There was more than one factor that contributed to the popularity of My Babe. A remarkable 14 of Walter's songs made it into the top 10 of the rhythm and blues charts between the years 1952 and 1958. There was a significant amount of recording that he did for Chess Records and its subsidiary, Checker, in which he demonstrated his singing abilities as well as his musical skills. Walter's status as one of the most influential figures in the Chicago blues scene was firmly established as a result of his frequent placement on the charts. Having difficulties in both your career and your personal life. Around the same time that Walter was reaching the top of the charts with his most successful single, My Babe, in 1955, his career started to experience serious difficulties. He began to experience a decline in the stability of his band, which had been an essential component of his success. The Aces members, who had created the ideal musical backdrop for Walter's unique harmonica playing, started leaving one by one to seek other chances. Walter's harmonica playing had been considered groundbreaking. Walter was compelled to continually look for new musicians to replace the parts that were vacant as a result of the loss of his main band members. In the beginning, Walter replaced the Aces, who were leaving, with excellent musicians such as guitarists Robert Jr., Lockwood, and Luther Tucker, as well as drummer Odie Payne. His supporting band eventually became a rotating cast of musicians, which included guitarists Jimmy Lee Robinson and Freddie Robinson, as well as drummer George Hunter. This occurred for some time. It was during one of Walter's early tours that he experimented with integrating saxophone players into his traveling bands. Some of the more notable examples of this include the inclusion of young Albert Ehler and even Ray Charles. On the other hand, by the late 1952, Walter had completely abandoned the practice of employing a regular full-time band. Rather than that, he resorted to using a wide range of blues musicians from Chicago's plentiful reservoir of talent whenever they were required. It is beyond a doubt that the absence of a reliable supporting band had an impact on the cohesiveness and quality of his live performances, which had previously been the foundation of his appeal. Walter's personal struggles. During this period, Walter's troubles started to have a substantial influence on his work life. During the initial stages of his career, excessive drinking was not a concern. Nonetheless, it eventually became a significant issue. Walter was known to drink nothing stronger than cola when he initially joined the Muddy Waters Band. He had a reputation for drinking this. His drinking habits, on the other hand, became more severe as the decade of the 1950 seconds advanced, which resulted in unpredictable conduct and mood swings. The transformation that took place in Walter's personality had a significant impact on his capacity to conduct himself as the leader of the band. During this period, Walter's conduct was described as being similar to that of a cowboy by the historian Mike Rowe. His black Cadillac would frequently arrive at club gigs with a theatrical scream of brakes, attracting attention to himself in a manner that was more about spectacle than playing. He would do this to attract attention to himself. Additionally, Walter's temperament, which had always been keen, became much more acrimonious. A fellow harmonica player named Golden Big Wheeler made the observation that although Walter had the potential to be very charming, he also had the potential to be quite difficult to deal with if he developed a distaste for someone. The unpredictability of Walter's conduct made it difficult for him to establish strong connections with other artists and professionals in the business, which further complicated his career. Even though Walter was going through his challenges, the music industry was going through bigger upheavals. It was during this time that younger African-American listeners were beginning to lose interest in blues music, while at the same time, white revivalists were beginning to become aware of it. During the latter half of the 1950 seconds, Walter continued to produce high-quality content in the studio, despite the difficulties he was experiencing in his personal and professional life. Nevertheless, the detrimental effects of his way of life were becoming more and more apparent. In the 1960 seconds, Walter was visual evidence of his turbulent personal life, as he had facial scars from drunken altercations. These scars were noticeable on his face. During a discussion that took place in the 1960 seconds between Muddy Waters and Paul Oliver, Muddy Waters made a statement about Walter's strong personality and the challenges that he had encountered. He even said that Walter had a bullet lodged in his leg at the time during the chat. Despite this, Walter's image as a pioneer in the blues harmonica genre remained unharmed, and he continued to be able to book high-profile performances. In 1964 and 1967, he participated in the American Folk Blues Festival, which took him on 2 separate tours of Europe. There is just one known video footage of Walter playing, and it was captured during his tour in 1967. Following its initial broadcast on Danish television, this film, which features Walter providing support to Hound Dog Taylor and Coco Taylor, was subsequently made available on DVD in the year 2004. Additional video from a television appearance that Walter made in Germany during the same tour, in which he sang his singles My Babe and Mean Old World, was made available on DVD in Europe in the year 2009. In contrast, the European tours became a bright spot in the decline of Walter's career. In the 1960 seconds, he continued to record and perform, but his frequency of activity was significantly reduced, mainly limited to the Chicago area and its vicinity. Walter's performances and musical output during this period were not complete failures, but they did not achieve the same brilliance as before. The difficulties he faced were not only due to his failures, but also due to the profound changes in the professional music of the period. With the rise of rock and roll and other popular music genres, blues artists, especially those already established like Walter, were forced to face a big formula: how to maintain their appeal to fans. These new musical genres attracted the attention of a younger audience, bringing blues to the forefront of the industry. While some blues artists successfully adapted to these changes, Walter had a harder time, partly due to personal problems and partly due to clientele. Not only that, the music industry in the 1960 seconds was notoriously abusive, especially for African-American artists. Unfair recording contracts and a lack of transparency in the distribution of profits meant that many talented artists did not receive due credit for their efforts and contributions. Walter, like many musicians of his time, had to protest against this. Walter faced numerous problems in his musical career, including disputes over fair wages, copyright rights, and artistic control. These issues were not only financially draining, but also affected his self-esteem and creativity. When confronted with a music industry known for its exploitation, especially of African-American blues artists, Walter, who was already struggling with personal difficulties, felt the package was exacerbated. External pressures combined with internal struggles caused his career to gradually decline. In 1954, a pivotal year in Walter's life, he gave himself over to alcoholism, a problem that affected both his personal life and his career. Worse, he not only openly accepted it, but made it part of his artistic image. The song Sloppy Drunk is a clear example of his self-exposure, with the powerful lyrics declaring, "I'd rather be drunk than anything I know." This is not just an exercise in social attitudes or conventional moral standards, but also a genuine confession of his condition. This choice is not simply an act that can be presented in financial or social terms, but also reflects a more bitter reality. For Walter, the use of alcohol must have become a coping mechanism for the pressures of the music industry, as well as the personal pain he suffered. The lyrics to Sloppy Drunk are not simply fun, but also the desperate cry of an artist who is losing his way. Walter, despite his talent and popularity, cannot escape the cycle of personal and social problems that have surrounded him throughout his career. In openly admitting to his alcoholism, Walter did not attempt to hide or escape reality. Instead, he openly expressed his vulnerability through his music, making it a part of his artistic legacy. This also reflected the psychological struggles that many artists of his time went through, especially in the fraught and unfair context of the music industry at that time. A mirror of the deeply rooted problems that were starting to devour him, it was a reflection of everything. The music industry is a very close-knit community, and Walter's drinking issues became infamous within that community. Due to his excessive use of alcohol, he had serious and even violent repercussions. It was in 1958, when he was drinking, that he was involved in a very serious event in which a lady shot him in the leg. Walter would be forced to walk with a limp for the rest of his life as a result of this injury, which would serve as a continual physical reminder of the toll that his lifestyle was having on him. He was surrounded by people who could see the toll that Walter's lifestyle and the changes in the profession had taken on him. It was Muddy Waters, a former bandmate of Walter's, who revealed that little Walter had died 10 years before his official death. This was not only a sad remark, but also a bitter truth about Walter's condition in his later years. Although he had once developed hopes of achieving great success in his musical career, personal troubles and difficulties at work hindered those opportunities. Yet, despite the challenges Walter faced, he still believed that success was somewhere on the horizon. However, the truth is that his career was severely affected by his difficult temperament and his difficulty in collaborating with those around him. In the Chicago blues scene, Walter was known for his temper and intensity. This caused many of his fellow musicians to not want to continue working with him or performing with him. Many of them found working with Walter a fulfilling and stressful experience, not because of his lack of talent, but because of his difficult personality. Sadly, Walter's popularity has gradually faded due to these personal troubles. What's worse, many musicians and producers have openly said that Walter's voice is no longer as good as it used to be. Some even described his voice as tired and weak, making them feel embarrassed to work with or perform with him. The recording studio, once Walter's creative space, has now become the place where he faces his biggest challenge. Walter's voice is getting weaker when he has to sing into a microphone, and this has become a serious problem. Music producers who once appreciated Walter's talent are now faced with the fact that he is no longer able to maintain the quality of his music as before. The decline in his voice not only made recording difficult, but also took away much of the appeal of Walter's music, which had captivated legions of fans during his peak years. During one of the recording sessions, there was even a tragic incident that was allegedly heard, in which someone was heard urging, "Don't sing, Walter, because if you do, we're ruined." The wistful response that Walter gave, "All right," conveys a great deal of information about his knowledge of his deteriorating talents and the impact that this was having on his sense of self-worth. In addition to booze, Walter was suffering from several other things. Those who were involved in the music scene were aware of the fact that he was also struggling with addictions to other narcotics. His personal and professional life became even more complicated as a result of this concoction of addictions, which made it increasingly challenging for him to continue performing at the same level of musicianship that had brought him fame. Walter still had several influential followers in the music industry, which is an interesting fact. At the height of their prominence, the Rolling Stones were devoted followers of Walter's work. Walter's work was important to them. On the other hand, even with their backing, he was unable to reverse the downward track of his professionalism. Regardless of the possibilities that presented themselves, it appeared that Walter was unable to get the break that he required to turn things around. An unfortunate turn of events would bring about the end of Walter's life, not long after what ought to have been a defining moment in his professional life. 1967 marked a turning point in Walter's career when he toured with the American Folk Blues Festival in Europe. For many who witnessed the tour, Walter's image changed. They saw a different artist than before, one who had kicked his drinking habit and found balance in his life. This was a hopeful change for Walter, as his drinking habits had caused little problems in his career or personal life. For loyal fans, the prospect of Walter returning to the top of his game was something they had always longed for. They believed that quitting drinking could be the first step in examining his career, and at the same time opening a new, brighter chapter in the life of this legendary bluesman. However, these hopes were short-lived. Despite the positive changes for a short time, Walter could not escape the ghosts of the past. When he returned for his second tour in Europe, the positive changes were sadly not sustainable. Walter's complex internal and external factors made it easy for him to fall back into his old ways, and any progress he had made gradually faded away. This not only disappointed his fans, but also left Walter facing even greater difficulties. One of the worst attempts occurred when Walter was involved in an attack at a nightclub on Chicago's South Side. During a break in the performance, an unexpected conflict broke out between him and another person. The report of the incident is still unclear, but what is known is that Walter was injured in the fight. Although the injuries he suffered were not serious, this incident had a larger impact. The previous violent fights, combined with the injuries accumulated over the years, caused Walter's health to deteriorate upon his return. Each wound, whether small or large, contributed to a perfect storm of identifiable pain. These injuries not only affected Walter's muscles, but also left a deep mark on his psyche. As an artist, maintaining physical and mental health was of utmost importance. But for Walter, both his physical and mental frailty became an unbearable burden. The injuries from this attack only exacerbated his already long-standing exhaustion. The effects of these violent early battles were not only physically devastating, but also mentally and emotionally draining, leaving Walter vulnerable to the fragments of life. A girlfriend's apartment at 209 East 54th Street in Chicago was the location where Walter's body was discovered the next morning. He had been found dead in his sleep. It was determined that coronary thrombosis, which is a blood clot in the heart, was the official cause of death that was mentioned on his death certificate. It is quite interesting to note that the exterior injuries that he had as a result of the battle were so little that the police first recorded his death as being the result of natural or unexplained causes. There was not even a single exterior injury that was mentioned on the death certificate. On the 22nd of February 1968, Walter's remains were laid to rest at St. Mary's Cemetery in Evergreen Park, Illinois. The cemetery is located in the state of Illinois. It was a difficult life that had been distinguished by amazing highs and tragic lows, and the funeral represented the end of that existence.